Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you find your unique teaching style. My goal with this podcast is to share helpful tips, strategies, and to give you the motivation you need to gain momentum in your teaching so you can continue being the music teacher rock star you already are. Hey everybody, today's episode is with Aimee Pfitzner, and she is amazing, and she's going to come on today to talk all about Orff, especially when it comes to singing games and body percussion. And Aimee has so much wisdom and amazing insights to share, and I cannot wait for you to listen to this episode. If you don't know about Aimee, she has been the lower school music director at Cannon School in Concord for 22 years. She holds a Master's of Music degree from UNC Greensboro and completed Level 1 Orff Schulwerk training at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts, and then also Levels 2 and 3 at UNLV. She has a master's level at the University of Memphis, and she's a frequent presenter at AOSA chapter workshops around the country and national AOSA conferences. Her books, Hands to Hands, Clapping Songs and Games from Around the World, Hands to Hands 2, Painted Music, and Sing a Song, Play a Game, are available from Beaten Path Publications. She's passionate about music making, gardening, adoption, and anything and everything creative. When it comes to painting, zen doodling, digital scrapbooking, making jewelry, writing music, crafting, and sewing. When she's not teaching or writing music, singing, or creating, she can be found musically musing on her blog at ofortunaorff.com. So without further ado, let's dive right into this episode with Aimee. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am so excited to welcome Aimee, and I'm going to just let her jump right in and introduce herself a little bit. So welcome, Aimee.
Thank you very much for having me. I am Aimee Pfitzner. I am the author and blogger at ofortunaorff.com. And I am going into my, gasp, can't believe it, 27th year of teaching music, and never set out to become an elementary music teacher like most of us. I thought I was going to be teaching the more, sophisticated music of the choir, the high school choir, do the more sophisticated music and all that. And then got into student teaching and fell in love with those little wee ones and never looked back. So here I am going, where I'm now one of the old people on the hallway, which feels very odd to be in that sort of position.
Yeah, I love that. I love 27 years. That's amazing. So you probably have seen music education change so much. I mean, I just feel like every year there's something new, especially with technology. I mean, has it just changed so much since you've started?
Okay, so here's what's going to really crack you up is that when I started, so my senior year of high school was the first year that they actually required the freshmen to take the computer classes. I was the only senior. I decided I was the only senior. I went in to take the computer class with all the freshmen. I was the only senior. And then my freshman year of college, I was at the Hart School of Music in Hartford, Connecticut. And another girl that I was friends with, she said, hey, I need to go to the computer lab because, we didn't have computer at home, computer or cell phones back then.
Oh, yeah.
Dinosaur era. So that I have to go to the computer lab to check an email. And we all kind of looked at her like, what's an email? And,
Yeah.
Like, back then it was her dad was in the military.
Yeah.
And that's actually how the internet began, was as a military application. So, going, from learning about email to now, it's just, we don't even think about it. But yeah, I mean, my daughter is far more adept at technology. So like something on GarageBand, I'll just give her and be like, okay, play with this. I don't get this. Help me. She'll figure it out way faster than me.
Oh, completely. Yeah. I love that because, I mean, I just know that you probably just have so much good advice for new teachers even. Have you had a lot of student teachers in your classroom over the years?
The strange thing for me is that I have not. I would have loved to have had, but unfortunately, because I teach at an independent school we are not allowed by the public universities and private universities to teach because we don't adhere to state standards and we are not state regulated.
Okay.
So because of that, unfortunately, there's not the availability to have a student teacher, which I would have loved to have had.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a rule. Wow.
Unfortunately, yeah. And it's the public university, it's the universities that dictate that. It's not my school.
Right. Right. Well, I'm sure you've been able to mentor teachers in other ways, though.
Yes.
Yes, of course. Well, Aimee, I want to just jump right in today, and we are going to talk about the Orff approach. And I know, yay. And so I would love to just, first of all, pick your brain a little bit and ask you, how did you first hear about the Orff approach? And then we'll move on from there.
Okay, so when I was in college, I was an opera major, and I did a double major in music education and opera, and then eventually tracked out of that into just a music education degree. And I had to take the music education 101 kind of elementary methods class,
Yeah.
and it was the one singular elementary methods class that I was required to take.
Yes.
And we just kind of went through like all the different approaches. MLT wasn't really a thing back then, so we didn't go over that, but it was Kodai and it was Orff, and they touched a slight bit on Laban, and then that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So, and then she brought out the instruments like one day, and like we had a rapid fire thing, and I liked how they sounded. And then I got my first teaching job. I was living in Maine, that's where I'm from, and I just loved those instruments, and I begged and pleaded. I didn't know what I was doing, but I begged and pleaded for them to buy me a couple of Orff instruments. And I just I didn't have a clue how to use them. And then after 4 years of being in public school in Maine, I had an opportunity to move to North Carolina and be in a place that was slightly warmer without 8 months of winter. And so I jumped at the chance to move here. And then I took went to an Orff workshop. And it was actually a drumming workshop. But then I found out, and it was actually like 2.5 hours away from me. And then I found out that there was one right here in my area, and where I live is in Charlotte. And so I jumped into that, and then very quickly became a board member, and then went and took my levels. And then at that first workshop, it was like, oh man, it wasn't just about the instruments, though I loved that sound. I loved the whole approach and the holistic and the creative part of it. And I loved all the different ways that students were taught to be sort of in control and in charge. And it was a teacher, more of a facilitator. And I could honestly say that, finding Orff not only changed my teaching in a really drastic and radical way, but it really truly changed my life.
Yeah, I would love for you to expand on that a little bit, and tell us, to you, what does it mean to be an Orff teacher? Because I feel like, and you've probably heard this before, Orff, like you said, the Orff instruments, and that is something I was very drawn to as well. But a lot of times, they're called a lot of times the Orff instruments instead of mallet instruments or drums. And so I just want teachers to know there's so much more to the Orff approach. And so what does it mean to be an Orff teacher to you?
Well, let me just say first that there is a very common misconception that the Orff approach is about the pitched percussion or the mallets or what we call the Orff instrumentarium. It is not. You do not have to have one single xylophone or a glockenspiel or a bass bar. You don't need any of that. It's really about giving the students the opportunity to do 4 things that we talk about a lot in Orff, which is to imitate, to explore, to improvise, and to create. And the students are really, a lot of times, it's teacher as facilitator. You're teaching them the concepts and skills, and you're building on that through some really wonderful scaffolding that happens. But there is music literacy that is involved. We do sing all the time. There is an emphasis on singing. There is an emphasis on using the body. It is music and movement education, because the body is very much a part of what we use to create sound and to create movement. I won't call it dance. We don't always dance. We move very often. But it's a way of using our bodies and voices to do those four things: to imitate, explore, improvise, and create.
Yeah, I love that. So my story is when I started out, I had no instruments and I had no, well, teaching resources, but no instruments. And then so I did kind of in my area at the time, I was in Tulsa. And so it was, like you said, I found workshops and then I ended up going to a workshop they called Orff Alive, which is where the different music teachers would come and share. And, just like you, it was in my elementary music methods class, which just, I feel like they need more than one elementary music methods class in college because there's no way. It's just scraping,
Preach it, girl.
Yeah, I mean, you can't learn all the things that quick. But so my limited knowledge from a textbook and, my different practicums and things, I walked into this workshop like, this is a what workshop? What is that? And I'm like reading again, like, what is Orff? And so just talking to other teachers who have been using the approach. And then I did take Orff level 1 and the same thing, I walked in super overwhelmed. They handed me this giant notebook and I'm like, whoa, what do we do with this? But then I realized it's about experiencing it. And I think once you do experience it and you do start attending workshops, and I feel like if I can encourage any teacher, if you're sitting here listening going, well, I don't know what my teaching approach is, or just go to different workshops, whether it's Godai or for whatever, because that'll help you figure out your teaching style. And it's okay to have, I feel like, approaches from both methods.
I think pedagogically, we're all getting in similar sort of cars to take the journey.
Yeah.
We're just doing it in a slightly different way. Some of us have 2 wheels, some of us have 3, and some of us have 7 on our cars. But it's just a different way, a different approach. But yeah, I think experiencing as many different forms of approaches or styles, pedagogies of teaching not only makes you a stronger teacher, but eventually you kind of figure out what works for you, what jives with you. For me, the creativity aspect of Orff was overwhelmingly what drew me to the process. I mean, originally it was the sound of the instruments, and I knew I loved that sound and I wanted to have students actively engaging in making music. But I think eventually it became where I was just overwhelmed at the possibilities of the purposeful and impactful creativity that I could have my students engaged in.
I love that. No, that's exactly right. It's about experiencing it and just putting yourself out there. And even if it's overwhelming and you're like, I don't really even know what Orff is, I hear everybody talking about it, but just go. And there's teachers there like you, we talked about you mentoring. There's teachers, they're willing to mentor you and be like, hey, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that'll help you learn as well. So,
and I think the community of what we call orphans, of people who use the Orff approach, the community is so loving and so giving. And if you ever have been on the Facebook AOSA page and you go ask a question, you have 15 to 20 responses within 15 to 20 minutes, because there's literally thousands of people on that page who are just willing to share their expertise. They're not huddled away, keeping all of their knowledge to themselves in some closet. Everybody really wants to share and wants to open up this dialogue of what the Orff approach is about and how to encourage our students and how to be a better teacher. But it's a very caring, sharing, high energy, wonderful bunch of people. Some of my best friends I have met through the Orff work.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're exactly right. I love that. So we talked about a little bit about body percussion, and I mentioned I didn't have instruments when I started out in my classroom. And so I love to tell teachers that your students have bodies. And so they, and they can make music. There's so many different ways to make music with your body. So I would love to talk about body percussion for just a little bit. And what are your favorite ways to use body percussion in the music classroom?
So I have a similar story. When I first got to my school 23 years ago, I've been at the same school now. I had a shaker, a tambourine, it's some very old textbooks, and I think maybe a triangle or maybe a couple of sand scraper thingies. That was it.
With the sandpaper coming off.
With the sandpaper, yeah, oh yeah, you betcha, girl, absolutely. So I didn't have a whole lot of instruments and didn't really know what I was doing. So I did a lot of body percussion. And I still, to this day, even though I have a huge number of Orff instruments, I have a really nice budget at my private school. I'm very blessed. So I have a lot of toys. I have a lot of stuff. I have like 26 djembes and tubanos. I mean, I have a crazy amount of instruments, and I've been there a long time. So I've built up my instrumentarium. But even so, I don't use the Orff instruments every single class period because my students need to experience music on their bodies first. And I became so passionate about this that a few years ago, I wrote a couple books about hand clapping games. And it's really just body percussion.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. So like before I will even consider putting students on a barred instrument, they have to be able to demonstrate that they can keep a beat on their bodies, or they can walk the beat, or they can clap the beat. Because if they can't do it there, then I'm not going to put mallets in their hands and ask them to go play the beat, because that's jumping ahead where they need to be. They need to experience it first on their bodies. And we might do that for one class period. We might do that for 3 or 4 class periods and create this whole huge body percussion piece that we're then going to transfer over to maybe unpitched percussion first, so that a clap becomes a wood instrument and a snap becomes a triangle sound. And then eventually maybe we'll transfer that over to pitched percussion. So it's sort of this sequential stepwise motion, and you don't just like immediately put them on the Orff instruments because you're not going to have them be successful. And ultimately, we want our kids to feel a great amount of success in what they're doing. So I strongly, strongly, strongly believe in body percussion. And I think hand clapping games are a great way to do that, because a lot of times those sequential steps can get really complex with some of those hand clapping games. But also just straight up body percussion and adding it to a poem, or one of the old rebus rhymes, Mother Goose rhymes, adding percussion to those kind of things with some kind of patterning going on within that is a wonderful way to give your students sort of that, scaffolding to hold on to that sort of, this is the structure that we're going to use, but we're going to add something fun to make this more interesting, and then take the words out. And then you get all these really cool sounds that are happening with their bodies. And how many different sounds can we make? And can you think of doing that a different way? And then you start to do the exploration part once you've gone through the imitation. And how can we change that? And what else can we add to it? And then you're really into what we call the Orff approach.
I love that. One of the things I love about body percussion is kids a lot of times have never experienced music by using their bodies. I mean, you have kids that probably like just for fun practice stomping, like at recess, or they clap, but like you said, just experience and exploring music with their bodies. A lot of times they've never done that. And so it's so cool to see they're just the things they came up with and how excited they get. Like, wow, I just made a rhythm with my body and steady beat. I just think it's so neat to watch that.
It's exciting and really fulfilling for me when I see a kid learn about the different ways of clapping, like clapping with 2 fingers as opposed to clapping right in the palm of your hand, or doing a clap where you have both hands cupped and then you're clapping in, or where you have both hands that are flat that are clapping in, and the different kind of pitches that you can sort of get, or clapping in front of your mouth that's open into an O shape, and what kind of sound that makes. And it's really interesting because they sort of become aware that, hey, there's all these cool sounds that I can make, besides that disgusting noise of putting my fist underneath my armpit kind of thing. That they've heard. But I do think that our kids are so tied to technology nowadays that there's a lot less exploration going on than what I grew up with, which is sad.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree with that. It's harder to keep their attention, and their attention spans, I don't know, like a lot less than they used to be. And it's, you feel like sometimes you're an entertainer because you're just trying to keep their attention going. But part of it is just keeping class time moving and keeping, things going in the music room. So there is not a lot of time for them to think, oh, I'm bored, or let me distract my neighbor, or let me, talk, because you keep it moving. And so if there's a teacher listening to this and they are, maybe comparing themselves to someone that has a lot of instruments, and they're like, well, wait, I can't do the Orff approach because like they're having that thinking of it's about the instruments. Would you encourage them just to, first of all, go to a training, but also to just start with body percussion, have their kids do speech pieces and sing, and then just slowly build it up over time?
I would say that there's a lot more complexity to the answer. I would say, number one, don't compare yourself, because every situation and every teaching situation is very unique. My students at my private school are going to be vastly different than students at a Title I school, or students that have a high number of ESL students, or the school, like there's a school right down the road from me that has music every other day. It's a public school. Other public schools in our areas don't have that. They have music once every 6 days. So those kids are going to have a very different experience. I would also say one of the best pieces of teaching advice I was given when I was young was teaching is a marathon. And so you come up with 4 great things to do this year with your first graders. And the next year you come up with 4 more things to do with your first graders. Then you got 8 things. And then by the time you hit year 5, you got 20 awesome things to do with your first graders. So you have to sort of pace yourself out. But I do think, go to a workshop. Number one, that's huge. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to go and just experience and see if this is something that you're intrigued about, interested in. And then you get there and you're like, oh, wow, this is so cool. But then some of the stuff that they're going to do at that workshop might not be stuff you might be able to immediately implement. That's okay. That's okay. Not everything that you're going to go to a workshop and get is going to be something you're going to be able to apply immediately on Monday. It might be something that's a holiday. There's a couple holiday pieces in there. Well, obviously you can't do this right on Monday, but I guarantee you'll find something that you can use, whether it's an approach to a specific concept or skill. You might learn a folk dance that's new to you. You just might pick up on some really great tips or tricks, or you might be like sold out all in. And then once you attend a couple of workshops and do at least 3, because they have different presenters who teach on different subject areas, who teach different conceptually. You might go to one that's just a folk dance session. You might go to one that's all about, using manipulatives. You might go to another one that's all about children's lit. And these are all going to be things that have the Orff approach infused within them. But go to at least 3, just to kind of get your feet wet and to start experiencing different things. Don't go to just one workshop and say, well, that wasn't for me. I can't do Orff. All they did was Orff pieces on the barred instruments. Well, that's just that one presenter. That doesn't mean that's the Orff approach. The Orff approach is this multifaceted diamond. And so you have to experience some of the different facets. And then I would also say, once you've done that, the levels courses are absolutely invaluable. And it's one of those things you just have to invest in yourself to do it. There's also grants and there's scholarships that are available that you can use through AOSA. There are a couple of scholarships that are available. And then sometimes, you can creatively finance things through Donors Choose or through some other organizations that are out there. And the levels courses are 2 weeks every summer, and they're held in different locations, and there's probably one near you. And whoever's listening, I guarantee there's something near you for a levels course, because they're all over the US. And they are just amazing. It will absolutely rock your socks off. And you will never laugh, and you'll never be so exhausted in your life. That's what you go to a levels course, but you will walk out of there so incredibly exhilarated.
Yeah. I love your advice that you gave about attending 3 workshops, because it's so true. Because just like every teacher teaches differently. I mean, a workshop presenter is a teacher, and they're all, like you said, not just going to have different teaching styles, but present about something different. And that's been my experience is, and I think that's okay because you're getting different things from every person in every workshop you go to.
Yeah, I present workshops all around the country, and I present in Canada also. And I love going to present workshops because they see the light bulbs come on, and it's just so much fun to see that. But I present mostly on what my books are about. So I have 2 hand clapping games books. I have a painted music, which is art, music, and children's literature, integrated activities. So I present on that one. And then I have a singing games from around the world book. And so those are the things that I present on. So like if you're looking for something that's heavily barred instruments, that's not going to be me. I don't usually even ask for Orff instruments to be, I only have like 1 or 2 there when I do my sessions because I'm trying to do more body percussion and the hand clapping games with more of an Orff approach. And so that's my presentation. So somebody else is going to have a really different kind of look and feel and content with what they're doing, but it's all wrapped up within the Orff approach.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. And congrats on presenting so much. That's awesome. And I love your books too. And if you're listening, you definitely need to check them out. And we're going to let you tell everybody where to find you at the end, I promise. Because they need to check out your website. Okay, so before we go, I want to ask you about singing games. This is something I know is something that's super important. And like you talked about, teachers think of Orff, not everybody, but some teachers think of Orff as being the instruments, but I want them to know that it is also about singing. And so can you maybe share with us some favorite singing games you love or how you like to incorporate singing in your classroom?
So I have posted above my desk at school another, having taught so long, you have all these words of wisdom that you want to use. And so I found this a few years ago, and it was sing every class, play every class, laugh every class. And I sort of adhere to that wisdom because I think that's so important. And as a singer, we do sing every class. We do play every class. Sometimes play means playing a game. Sometimes it means me getting on the floor and wriggling like a snake with the kids, or flapping my wings like a butterfly with scarves attached to each of my arms around the room. And sometimes it means playing tambourines or playing recorder to the students while they're doing a movement activity. Or it means me playing an Orff instrument, or the kids playing Orff instruments, or the kids playing recorder, or the kids playing unpitched percussion. So some kind of play, and then some way we have to laugh. Some way in there has to be some joy. Every single class. So singing games, I absolutely love them. And I started on my blog, I had a post that but it's funny, like 2 of my books, the hand clapping game, started out as a blog post.
Wow.
Blew up into 2 books. And then my singing games also started out as a blog post and ended up turning into, I was collecting all these games from all over the world. And that ended up becoming a book as well. And that's my newest book that just came out in March or April. But there's a bunch of them on the blog you can go get for absolutely free. And you don't have to buy the books. So, but there's so many singing games that are so much fun from all around the world. And so a few of my favorites, Chicken on a Fence Post has got to be like my all-time, like one of my all-time favorites. So I was wandering through Walmart, and if it was I have a dog, so I have a 72-pound black lab. So I'm in the doggy aisle looking for some toys because my dog is a big chewer. And I find this, I had a rubber chicken, like the squishy one that bends.
Yeah.
And great. It was, my kids loved using it. It was hysterical. We played the game. They loved it. And then once you play the game a few times, it's a great one to introduce 16th notes. Perfect. Love it. My kids love to play that. They will play that till the cows come home. So I'm in the dog aisle and I find this hard rubber chicken. And I'm like, oh, this is cute. And my daughter goes to grab it from me. She's like, Mom, you've already got one at school. She knows you well. You've already got one at school. Mo doesn't need it. My dog's name is Mozart. Mo. So she grabs it from me and the thing squeaks. And I start laughing hysterically in the middle of Walmart. I let loose and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing breaks, and I'm dying, and I'm speaking it like crazy, and it makes different pitches when you squeeze it differently.
Oh my gosh.
I ended up getting like 2 of those because I was like, well, if one breaks, then I'll have another one in like 10 years if this one breaks. So I started using that one at school. Well, my kids just go bananas for that one. They just love chicken on a fence post. So that's my favorite, especially for teaching 16ths. Perfect. And then Grizzly Bear, which I absolutely love, which has kind of an interesting story. It started out as a Swedish song called Björn and Sover. And then Ossie Aaron, who was one of the initial people who began Orff here in the United States, she actually went over to the Norwegian countries and she started learning some of the European songs. And she found Grizzly Bear. And I had a phone conversation with her shortly before she died. And lo and behold, she is actually the one that wrote the words Grizzly Bear.
Oh, wow.
The song Björn and Sover, this old Swedish song. And I asked her, I said, so you actually wrote the words? And she said, well, no. I just made the words so that they could be sung by English children. And I was just like, okay, so you wrote the words Grizzly Bear. And she's like, well, I just took the song. And I'm like, you wrote the words. And you
can claim it. Yeah.
She was just so gracious about the whole thing and just so humble about it. And it was just like, it was just very sweet. It was just a lovely moment. So I love Grizzly Bear. And I have several ways to play it in my singing games book, including one with a parachute. So fun.
Oh, how fun. Kids love parachutes.
There's so many different ways to play these different games. Black Snake, where are you hiding? This is actually from North Carolina, my adopted state. Love that game. Great for teaching dynamics. It's a numbers game that I wrote that's in my singing games book that is so much fun. We Are Dancing in the Forest. My little ones love that. And great for solo singing. And then one of my other favorites is a Japanese one called Jan Kenpon-yo. And that is basically it's rock, paper, scissors, shoot. But it's a game and I love it because it's mix meter. Which is so fun.
Yeah.
We have an epic game in my classroom where everybody gets to make a partner. And then the winners all stay in one place and everybody else goes somewhere else and they find other partners. But everybody that's on the music rug in the middle is sort of competing until there's one final, champion of the Jan Kenpon-yo. So it's super fun. Any chance my students get to sing, and singing games are such a great thing, especially for those older kids who need the buy-in, who don't necessarily want to be singing. They don't even realize that they're really, producing vocal sounds that are melodious, otherwise known as singing. They don't even realize they're doing that.
Yeah.
They're playing this cool game.
Right. Yeah, because you're making music fun. And when they're, participating in it, a lot of times they forget they're even in music class, which is, that's the whole point, is to get them to enjoy it. And I love that you said you want them to always have some kind of fun moment with you before they leave your room. And I think every teacher should strive for that. So last thing I want to ask you is, when you are lesson planning, I get this question a lot, as I'm sure you do too. I feel like when you're planning a lesson, there's so much you can do to a song. You can do movement, you can add instruments, body percussion, singing, all the things. So do you try to rotate a little bit of all of it not in a one class period, or like keep track of, okay, I did body percussion, next time I'll do this?
I have a sequence that I use for every time that I start a class. So we sort of do some warm-ups prior to every single class starting. So we always do some movement. We always do some rhythmic, either reading or improvisation or call and response, or those kind of different activities with rhythm, and that involves usually some body percussion as well. And then we're always doing a little bit of singing to start. So every single class sort of involves those different modalities before we even really get into the meat potatoes of the lesson necessarily. So I know you also have to be purposeful in what you're doing, and those darn concerts that get in the way.
Oh yeah.
They kill them,
yes.
Keeping it real, it is what it is. And
yes.
you do have to find those concepts and skills within that time of concert season. But I do try to have so that I am keeping track sort of in my documentation of, just for my own purposes, of when we do and how frequently we are playing with unpitched percussion. And so, at least, because I only see my kids once every 4 days.
Okay.
So I'm on a 4-day rotation. And, so you try to sort of have things so that you have a variety of activities. So you're not doing a folk dance every single time.
Right.
That's not going to work. But maybe you're having a folk dance one time, but then the next time you're taking that folk dance and you're deconstructing it, and you're taking pieces and parts of that so that the students can create their own movement piece from 3 different folk dances that you have taught previously, and those skills that they have learned within those folk dances, the different kinds of steps, the different kinds of directions, the pathways that they're moving, the different kind of weight and force that they're using. And maybe you're taking that, and once they've made up their own and they've created it with movement, maybe you're transferring some of that into, unpitched percussion, or you're adding an instrumental part. So you're just expanding upon this thing that you're creating until you have this piece that you can actually potentially perform, not necessarily always at a concert.
Right.
I'm frequently sharing on Seesaw with parents, and I'm very well known to go grab somebody from the hallway.
I love that.
You come in and watch my kids for 30 seconds.
I love that.
If something they want to share, or I'll ask the classroom teacher to come back and pick them up, 1 minute early. Can you come 1 minute early? I will make it up to you. Can you come 1 minute early?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's really important to vary the activities and the kind of things that you do, just to keep engagement high. The kids don't want to come in every single time and sing X song. They don't want to do that for 6 or 8 weeks. That gets very old. But if you're varying the activities that go along with that song each time, and you're expanding it into this bigger piece, then the buy-in's greater. And if you're giving them choice within that and giving them some areas of control and creativity within that, then you've got them.
Yeah. I think a lot of teachers are so stressed about teaching the objectives, but then also they have, and their material is growing every year. So they're so worried about getting to all of their material. But I love that you're sharing that it's okay to revisit a song, because you can do so much to even one song. And it's okay to not get to every song. Because at the beginning of this episode, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that, spiraling a song through 3 or 4 grade levels, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's a lot that's right with that. So it's not about the number of songs that you perform, but it's about the experiences that you're providing within those songs that you've chosen. And yes, I am an over planner. So I always over plan my lessons, and I'm like, I didn't get to that. But my kids had an amazing experience with those 3 things that we worked on today, and the depth of knowledge was amazing, and the creativity that I got out of those kids was unbelievable. And I didn't really know where that lesson was exactly going to go, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If at the end of my time with them, so you have to kind of unmake the peanut butter and jelly sandwich and figure out, my top grade is 4th grade, so I teach junior kindergarten, which is 4-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
4th graders. So I have to look at my 4th graders, and by the end of May of my 4th grade year, what do I need for my students to know musically and to have experience musically to be successful going forward into, for them, what is middle school. 5th grade is middle school for us. So, and then I have to look at my 3rd graders and where do I need them to be at the end of 3rd, and so on and so forth, and then sort of work backwards. It's not about the number of songs that you teach in a year. And I think that is such a misconception. We think we have to do 8 songs in 30 minutes. Well, that just doesn't work, people. I'm just going to say, it just doesn't work. And you're really not giving your students time enough to really delve into all the beauty and nuances of that song and all that can be done within that song.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Well, Aimee, I have loved this conversation, and I know we could keep going and going because you have so much great advice. I mean, I seriously know teachers listening to this, if they're new to Orff or thinking about Orff or are already teaching with Orff, that this advice you gave, I mean, I'm going to go back and even re-listen myself because it was really helpful. So before we go, I would love for you to share where everyone can find you and then any last minute advice you can think of that you would love to share with anybody.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks for having me again. This has been such a joyful conversation and so much fun. I love talking with other music teachers. There's just nothing like it. Is it? We're the only ones in our buildings, and it's so nice to have somebody else to just chat with. So I blog at ofortunaorff.com, and then you can find me on Facebook where, by the way, on my blog, everything that is on there is free. And I have literally like hundreds of PDFs and things that you can go get and songs that I write, and everything that I put up there is literally free. So please don't hesitate to ask for something. And if you're doing it on a mobile device, go down to the bottom and click on View Web Version, because over on the right, I have everything labeled. So if you're looking for something with quarter notes, scroll down and find that quarter note label, and you will find all the posts that contain things about quarter notes and etc. And then on Facebook, I have it's at O and then space for space tuna space Schulwerk, SCHULWERK. And you can find me on there. I post lots of videos of myself talking through lessons and giving little bits of advice, resources, just lots of different things. So I post a lot of videos on there and also some extras on there as well. And then on Instagram, it's Aimee, AIMEE. And then it's / and then O Fortuna Orff. So you can find me on there as well. And I post lots of different stuff on there, as well as stuff that's from the blog. So
awesome. And all these links will be in the show notes, everyone, as well. So make sure you look for those and connect with her. And Aimee, any last minute advice you would love to share with the teachers listening today?
I think the most important thing is just to get yourself out there and get to a workshop or two and make the time to invest in yourself. You will not ever regret having spent the time attending a few workshops with the Orff approach, because you will get something out of it. I guarantee you. And if you don't, I'll get you a free book.
Yes, you will. And I'll make sure you get it. Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate you coming on, and I've loved this conversation so much.
Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.